there's 700 people watching this conversation live. So I'm going to get straight to it. I'm just going to quickly introduce my guest today. And let me start with somebody who's redefining the idea of India by placing a Hindu Rashtra at the forefront. Not through rhetoric, but through reason. And that's something that's very different, because we hear a lot of rhetoric on TV channels, but reason is something that we don't hear often. He's fast becoming one of India's leading public intellectuals who sympathizes, in a way, with the right wing, is what some believe. He's an engineer turned Supreme Court counsel who is most famous for, of course, his Sabrimala case, and currently is penning in many a book, which I'm excited to read. But currently, his first book has become a bestseller, which is India, that is Bharat, Coloniality, Civilization and Constitution. Thrilled, delighted, humbled and honored to be able to welcome J Sai Deepak to I.I.M.U.N's Classroom to Career series.
Namaste. It's a pleasure to be on this platform. I look forward to interacting with your viewers. Let's see what you guys are going to throw at me.
Super. So all these viewers are all young people, like the young people that you just met at Rishabh University the other day. And very nice to be able to see Soumya with us today, because Soumya is a change from Sahil, and a better change, I must say. And just to quickly introduce her, she is an alum of Lady Shri Ram College in Delhi, HEC Paris. Is also the director for continuous learning at Rishabh University, apart from the very many things that she does at the university. And like I said, is a smarter, more articulate face than the last one, dare I say, who is on the show. But I'm glad to have you, Soumya, as a part of Classroom to Career.
Thank you, Rishabh. Thank you so much for inviting. Hi, Jay. Nice to be
Hi, Soumya. Same here.
Yeah.
Super. So let me get to the first question. You were an engineer and then you became a lawyer. Can you tell us, I'm yet in the conundrum of what to do in life, but you somehow managed to do one degree and then you did another. What was the thought behind that?
I'm not sure this is a sign of clarity or confusion. I'll leave it for people to decide whether I was clear about doing engineering after law. But the one thing I was very, very clear about is that I did not want to be someone who watches a civilizational transition from the sidelines. And the idea was to contribute to it in a very positive way with skill sets required for it. So although I'm sure that as an engineer, I may have contributed to it in a slightly different way, given that I was fairly outspoken, and I'm still, hopefully, the idea was to give that outspoken nature and the candor, perhaps the legal edge, or let's say the qualified edge that was needed to make an impact. That's one of the reasons that I made the transition. And second, of course, I've said this before on several platforms, that although civil services was an option that I seriously considered, I wasn't sure that my candor would be appreciated in the particular system. So that's one of the reasons that I made the transition to law. And law as a profession rewards or incentivizes controlled aggression. And it allows you to be a oral pugilist, if I may call myself. And in that particular sense, I think it rewards my natural instincts. That's one of the reasons that I chose law. There is not a single lawyer from this end to that end of my family. So I don't come from a family of blue bloods. I have no judges or lawyers or whatsoever. I'm a first generation lawyer. I'm a typical lower middle class family from the southern part of India, southern part of Bharat. So that's more or less my story.
How nice. And that's the story of a new young India that is emerging from across class, creed, community, and yet making its mark on both India and the world stage. But you're very candid, therefore I have to ask you this very candid question, that you see everything from the Indic lens. And I'm, as somebody, as an organization that has long promoted the idea of India for the last 10 years, the organization also believes in an Indian lens, but your Indian lens becomes a Hindu lens. And the question I want to ask you is, you refer to Nupur Sharma's statement currently as a statement that was correctly given. You refer to Mohandas Gandhi as Mohandas Gandhi and not Mahatma Gandhi.
Correct.
You have very strong views. The concept and tenet of Hinduism, and I must risk at the outset of asking this question, is Sanatan Dharma, which basically means carrying everybody along. Now, a lot of people Sai Deepak, feel that if Sanatan Dharma basically means carrying everybody along, then why have the exclusionist mindset of seeing this from the Hindu lens, so to say, rather than seeing this from the larger, wider, which is the Indic lens? Isn't it better to accept pluralism in comparison to be accepting in comparison to be accepting the Hindu lens, so to say?
So I think there are quite a few assumptions in your question, and allow me to go after each one of those assumptions. So the first thing is, you started with the assumption that Hindu Dharma or Sanatana Dharma is about taking everyone along. This seems like a paraphrasing of Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas. I don't think that's what Hindu Dharma is about. I don't think that's what Sanatana Dharma is about. Sanatana Dharma, at the end of the day, is not a quest for peace. It's primarily a quest for the truth. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm more interested in basing civilizational positions and social fabric related positions on truth and facts and evidence, as opposed to vague notions of unity. Second, I am not for a moment against unity. I'm not for a moment against communal harmony. My simple position has been, any relationship at the professional level, at the personal level, or the societal level, which is established on the basis of falsity, so to speak, is not it's not going to survive the test of time. And therefore, the quest has been to uncover the layers of falsehood under which our consciousness and our history has been buried under, and to face facts for whatever they are, even if they are uncomfortable, as opposed to saying that I want a certain community outside Bharat or out of Bharat. I'm merely saying everyone's welcome here as long as the basic roots and identity of this country are recognized. And as long as no other identity poses a threat or pits itself in an adversarial fashion to the identity that is native to it. I think that's a very, very fair and inclusive position, so to speak, without compromising the home identity. So I'm clearly making the position that Bharat is certainly open to a lot of people, but never at the expense of its own true self. Any identity which requires me to give up my own true self is not worth coexisting with, and that I will not beat around the bush on.
So basically, you are saying that the identity of India, the soul of India, is, correct me if I'm wrong, is a Hindu Rashtra?
100% yes. That's my position.
That is your position, and
yes.
and that is why a lot of people, and I saw that conversation that you had with Shashi Tharoor as well on discussing it, and it's pretty interesting. But I won't get into that entire big debate. But my 2 cents only on this for all the viewers also, and also I mean I'd love to hear what you think about it as well. Is shouldn't it be, and as an educated young person who's studied, come through the system, you are an engineer, now a lawyer. Shouldn't it be time that we stop dividing the country on the basis of Modi's Bharat and Nehru's India? And isn't it time to start calling it Nehru's Bharat and Modi's India? Now, some will call this rhetoric, but isn't it better to start calling a Nehru jacket and a Modi jacket an Indian jacket? And in that sense, I appreciate where you are coming from, saying that it should be an Indic lens. My question to you on the legal sense of it is, and I'll come to Soumya, who's wondering, saying, what is going on? The conversation was law. So I'll come back to Soumya and law. But in the legal sense of it, Sai Deepak, shouldn't it be all your eminent scholars and jurists who are giving out these judgments, the Supreme Court also, are quoting books, are quoting scholars who are westernized, who are coming from the West. It's very few people who quote and give judgments on the basis of Indian scholars. Isn't this a fundamental flaw in the way that India is seen, per se, by people who are in India? And to that end, shouldn't the legal system also be, dramatically changed in order to account for this new Indic school of thought, which doesn't seem to be coming through when it comes to the judiciary?
To respond to your opening remarks on whether it is Nehru's Bharat or Modi's India, frankly speaking, neither of these two individuals can encompass the ocean that is Bharat. So let us not limit the scope of Bharat to either of these two individuals. Bharat is defined by Shankaracharya. Bharat is defined by Chanakya. Bharat is defined by Swami Ramakrishna Paramhamsa. Bharat is defined by Swami Vivekananda. Bharat is defined by Aurobindo Ghosh. Not any of these political organizations or cultural organizations. These are the saints and the heroes who've defined us. So let's get our fundamental chat as far as who defines and what defines Bharat. That's one. Second, precisely my endeavor is towards not Indianization, Indicization of legal jurisprudence, which is to say that it is one thing to call yourself a Swarajya country, which is to say a country which has attained political freedom, and it is another to be governed by Swatantra, which is to say by those rules, by those philosophies, and by those darshanas, which are homegrown and indigenous in nature. So it is my position that we may be Swarajya, but we certainly haven't seemed to attain Swatantra. Therefore, the entire position from an Indic perspective is that we are governed by our tantras and our positions and our darshanas. I am certainly open to the Upanishadic position that let noble thoughts be accepted wherever they come from. But the first line of inquiry must be inward, and only when you do not find an answer from within, you look for answers from outside. That is the standard position, and that is consistent with human psychology as well.
Right. What was just to quickly respond and then move on to Soumya and bring her also part of the conversation is you said that India is not defined by Modi and Nehru, it's defined by Shankaracharya and it's defined by Ramanuja and it's defined by all of these brilliant scholars like Vivekananda. And as somebody who's read some works of Vivekananda, I'm glad that you touched upon Vivekananda as well. But it's not just Vivekananda, Ramanuja and all of these people. One can't deny the fact that today's narrative and the definition of India or the definition of Bharat is also going to be written across because of the narratives that are being shaped by books such as Vikram Sampath's Veer Savarkar or by books which are coming out on a Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose or books that were written on India after Gandhi and like what Rambua wrote. So the narrative building is, of course, is very nice and utopian to say that let's see India from the lens of Shankaracharya, but the harsh reality is, of course, that the narrative that is being passed on to today's 18-year-old who's listening to you eagerly is the fact that it's also been defined by the debate that Arnab Goswami is having, and so also the one that Barkha is having. So that is also something that defines the country in one way or the other. But let me not digress and just quickly take this to Soumya and ask her this as well. You're building an Indic university, Soumya. And you're building a university which is keen on talking about law. My question is this: today in India, lots of people see India as two Indias. I've written extensively that it's one India. But quickly, Soumya, to bring you in and to ask you this, saying that you're building an Indic university, you're building an Indian school of thought, and you're trying to push the field of law as a minor elective that's being offered as well. Now, the idea is that there is the idea of India and the idea of the constitution in India today is seen as two parts. There is the idea of India which is enshrined in the constitution and the idea of India which is enshrined in the civilizational state that is India. And to that end, how do you see India and how will this impact your academics in the university that you're trying to build?
Right. So I'm an academic, I'll talk to you in the that I've been working for past 5 years now. And very confident, very proudly, I can say that I'm working to promote civilizational history. I'm ensuring that students get a chance and confidence and awareness about the cultural identity, which is currently missing in schools and somewhere in families as well. When we talk about idea of India, the fact people like in a small way, people like J Sai Deepak in a very large way are able to talk about civilization state is the outcome of a new idea of India. We are not building a new idea. We are able to do it because India has now grown itself herself to accommodate people like us. So that's one. To talk about Rishihood and what are we doing, subject we're offering. Obviously, anybody can go on our website to have a look at the list of subjects, schools, courses that we're offering. but fundamentally what we believe is in three fundamental states. One is through education and through whatever we are offering, how do we ensure that we are creating humans, how I it's a very rough English translation, but what we call it Vyakti Nirman. And through Vyakti Nirman, how do we build narratives, which we call Vita Nirman? And once the narratives are built, how do we contribute that into Vyavastha Nirman? That how do we bring our thought process into the systems? So that's the objective that we have, that's the aim that we have in mind, and that's how the curriculum is designed. That is how the law subject as a minor elective is designed. And very proudly, I can say that we are not only focusing on law as a law subject, but we're also incorporating the concepts of leadership, of public policy into our curriculum. So, yeah.
Now, how lovely! You said that you're focusing not only on law, you're focusing on public policy, and you're focusing on leadership. All of which is going to build leaders like Sai Deepak and like the very many who come from I.I.M.U.N also, and who are today somewhere in Parliament. But the fundamental idea of India is the one that is often debated and is often discussed, and that brings me to again a question for Sai Deepak. Is that, and this emanates from a personal experience. Is I was in Srinagar and there were about 4,000-5,000 kids, and I was just going on rambling like I currently am. The students were of course not enamored about the speech that I was giving, but the audience had in the first row a person who was a chief guest who was following a Buddhist faith, a Buddhist faith. He was following Buddhism. The kids who were on stage were Sikh kids who were dancing. The school was a Christian school, and the people who were in the audience were 90% following Islam. Now, in this entire 30-minute monologue that I had given, the only time that the students actually listened, stood up and started clapping, was when the azan played. I paused for the azan to finish and then finished my speech. One of the things in our country, Sai Deepak, that is disappearing and dissipating because of these loudspeaker debates and because of loud voices is the very fabric that defines the country, the plurality of what India stands for. And to that end, you have been a very vocal advocate. I'm not saying one side of the aisle is where I.I.M.U.N is. I.I.M.U.N is in fact the center of the aisle. But and we welcome both views. But you are somebody who essentially is on the other side in that sense, the extreme right, where even in a case like Sabrimala, you landed up saying things like women should not be allowed. Women should not be allowed in the shrine, and this is something that essentially you fought for and you're very proud about, and you've given, of course, your statements, and I've seen these statements. My question to you is this: as a man of science, as somebody who understands how things work, don't you think that it's a natural process? And to that end, how can you stop a woman from entering a shrine? In terms of the fact that this is something that is like I said, is a natural phenomenon, on the concept that there is a celibate man inside. So I'm just saying that sometimes don't you think that in this very progressive country that is ours, there are thoughts that need to be changed? Or do you stand by your original stance that says that no, look, it is right that in Sabrimala we should not have women because there is a celibate deity?
So the best part about the questions that you've put so far is that I have to start with questioning the factual premise of every question that you put. Because first of all, I don't know which of my videos have you seen where I've taken the position that no woman should ever enter Sabrimala, because clearly that's never been my position, both in writing in court or in any public platform.
I'm glad that you're mentioning it. I'm glad you're mentioning it.
No, because the issue is very different from what you've made it out to be. The issue is, at the end of the day, women of a procreative age group, their entry into the temple is specifically forbidden because of it being a tantric temple. And this enters not the realm of science, this enters the realm of metaphysics. Now, you also accuse me of being a man of science. Let me actually recast it. I'm not a man of science under any circumstances. I'm a man of reason who understands the limits of secular logic and who understands where the religious logic starts. Therefore, I'm not someone who's going to hold himself out to be a militant rationalist who does not understand the requirements and the distinctions between metaphysics, spirituality, and rational science or secular science, so to speak. Then I've also clarified that temple is not the place where you play this science card or the rational card, because it is ultimately based on belief. Because if you start using science as the point of inquiry as far as religion is concerned, then I'd like to understand which religion, which faith system, and which temple at the end of the day, or which mosque, or let's say church, so to speak, can pass muster on the annals of science. So I think we should be very careful about what we're saying on these things. Second, my position with respect to Sabarimala has not changed, will never change. If anything, it has only solidified further. And I'm very clear that I have better reasons and better arguments to present than I did on the 26th of July, 2018, before the Supreme Court. Because my research has gone even further as far as this particular issue is concerned. And the best part is, since we're all constitutional patriots who are trying to celebrate the virtues of the Constitution, the Supreme Court itself has chosen to revisit its position thanks to a larger bench being constituted to look at this particular issue. So I would assume that 9 judges of the Supreme Court are perhaps better qualified than you and I when it comes to revisiting the question, when they have themselves realized that their first verdict may not be right. Okay? And not just that, I would also assume that the sole lone lady member on the Constitution bench who agreed with my position was and remains a woman of science and a woman of reason. And I also perhaps believe that the larger bench, which is now presiding over this particular issue, which has a lady on it once more, all of them are people of science and logic and constitution. So my point is, I think we must understand when we use the word logic or science, which is the specific situation or the context of the institution with respect to which you wish to, let's say, raise this particular argument. If it happens to be a temple, then there are certain different rules that have to be observed because it is not a secular institution. Now, the go-to argument the moment I present this is, a few decades ago, we did not allow untouchables as far as temples are concerned. So would you apply the same logic to this? Don't you agree that there is no distinction between non-entry of untouchables and, let's say, the prohibitions with respect to women of a procreative age group in Sabarimala is concerned? Well, I would still say that these are comparisons between apples and oranges for the simple reason that the prohibition with respect to the entry of untouchables or former untouchables into temples was removed by the community itself on its own, even before the constitution came into existence. That shows the nature of this particular community. At the same time, the counterfactual that you must seriously consider are the number of temples across the eastern part of the country which are dedicated to Devi, which is Shakti, where there are restrictions with respect to what men can do in those temples. Not just in the eastern part of the country, but equally in Kerala. So in Kerala, there is a female Sabarimala deity, so to speak, wherein it is a deity that is called the Bhagavati, and there are restrictions on male participation in that. So this is not a question of untouchability, neither is this a question of misogyny or misandry in either circumstance. This is a question of diversity and the very, let's say, virtue that you want to celebrate in Bharat, which is plurality of spaces and faith systems. And Hinduism happens to be a textbook example of plurality within the same faith system or the dharmic fold. That's my position.
No, and very well articulated, apart from the couple of things that you mentioned right at the start, which was in the sense that where you said that in terms of the little fact checking that you did, which I'm very happy that you did, that you said that it is, this has never been your position that women should not enter. Correct. But then you went on to elucidate that women of a particular age, which is what I was trying to get at, is people that should not enter the shrine. And that is something that is a position that you yet maintain, that women of a particular age should not enter. And which of course at a later date, and this is not the podium, which is at a later date, a conversation that I'd love to have with you at a later time as well. But I do respect the fact that you are a guest on the show, and therefore I will move on to, otherwise there are a couple of things that I'd love to say, but this is, and especially about the constitution and things like that which you mentioned. But but I know that you're in the middle of writing a book as well. So let me quickly take this to Soumya and ask her that the argumentative Indian as written by Amartya Sen, and in the days gone by, of course, now we are all openly very critical of anything that was written prior to a certain time era. But we are quintessentially the argumentative Indians. Whether you see a Sai Deepak, whether you see a Kapil Sibal, whether you see all of these people, they are argumentative Indians. Now, you are building the next breed of argumentative Indians with law being offered, with leadership being offered. So you're going to have these kind of people in the university. One of the things that I want to understand from you is there is a lot of colonization in education even today. How do you plan to decolonize the education system? Because the new education system, the new education policy will take a while in its incoming. So when it comes to decolonizing the mindset and building curriculum afresh, is there a new approach that you're taking to this? Or, I mean, is there something that we don't know about yet, about Rishihood doing something different from the other law universities across? Because they are just cut, copy, pasting curriculums as they've existed, the NLSs and so on and so forth across the world.
Right. Thank you. Yeah. So we're not building argument. I'll say we are building confidence in India, and Deepak is one of them. So more than we just being confident of who we are, and we know how to, sort of put across our thoughts confidently. That's one place I want to say. And yeah, on the curriculum, again, definitely the curriculum, as I said before, the focus is on building humans, building thoughts, and then putting these thoughts and people into the system. We are not copy pasting what others are doing. The fact that we have to start fresh and build curriculum perspective that is holistic in approach is a big task in front of us, and we've been able to do with people on board who have been as faculty members. So that's a starting point. So we are very selective when it comes to faculty. We try to bring in people who understand this approach, who are able to put across the big thought, big books that we have written into something that can be taught as a curriculum, which can be assessed, or we can use them as assessments as well. So that's the first step that we've taken here. And secondly, how do I say it? We also ensure what we are not teaching. So there is one place to ensure what we teach, and there is another step to ensure that what we don't bring into our system. So that's something we're cautious of. To start with, for example, for the university culture, and this dean culture is a Sanskrit scholar, Professor Sampadanand Mishra, and as dean culture, his responsibility is to ensure that the Indicness, we are able to build Indic Institute, also not through curriculum, but also through its culture, which is very essential. So that's something that we are doing different by building an Indic university into the educational realm. So when you say that, how are we refreshing? How are we building a new education system? That is definitely a big challenge, because that has not happened in 100 years or so. This is for the first time we are doing. We are taking one step at a time. It's definitely challenging, but we are building good. We are choosing the right faculty members. We are building the right curriculum with the right set of reading materials and books. And thirdly, how we are also incorporating the Indicness into the culture of Rishabh. It's just not what we're teaching in the classroom, but it's also how the classroom is being built and what's happening outside the classroom that we are cautious of.
No, and before we run out of time, it's a very interesting subject, Indicness or Indianness, and the debate of what defines India, what is Bharat, or India that is Bharat, as he's written in his book, and then of course in his subsequent books, which all of us are looking forward to. But the idea of what India stands for, and that's something that the entire university, and the premise of the university, just like yours, the Ashokas of the world, and so on and so forth. And my main bone of contention personally has always been this, and which I have articulated both to those on the right and the left, that let's stop doing temple and masjids, let's start building universities. And universities that look at, which I would love to look at Shankaracharya and Ramanuja, but also that look at Nehru's books, and so also Vivekananda's, because it is both that define India, it's both that represent India, and hopefully it's that India which should be taught to the next generation? That, of course, is my personal view. But I leave the last question. It's a happier question or a lighter question, which comes from Bollywood, which I hope Sai Deepak and me can both agree that is a good form of entertainment and good for India soft power. Popular artist and a good friend, Karan Johar, does this with a coffee cup and a hamper. I do it with a Rishabh cup and no hamper. But let me ask you, Sai Deepak and Soumya, this as well. What's the first thought when I say the following words? When I say law, Soumya, what's the first thought that comes to your mind?
Society.
When I say classroom, Sai Deepak, what's the first thought?
Guru.
When I say career, Soumya, what's the first thought that comes to your mind?
Impact.
Bharat, Sai Deepak?
Dharma.
When I say youth, Sai Deepak, what comes to your mind first?
Energy.
And when I say I.I.M.U.N, Soumya, what's the first thought that comes to your mind?
Rishabh Shah.
You can't say that. There's so many young people whose views are very different from mine and who come from the same organization. But honestly, it's been a pleasure to being able to be in conversation with the two of you, and it's been a lot of fun. Some of the questions that Sai Deepak answered, and I really like this. There's some thoughts that might be different, but one of the things that I must say, you're one of the few people after Subramaniam Swami who I've seen and met who speaks the way you do in public, and that's a lot of courage to be able to try to call a spade, even if the spade may not actually be a spade. But that viewpoint, we'll always agree to disagree. But
right.
It's been a pleasure being able to have this conversation with you. Of course, I'm the one who tries to keep the center, which is very difficult to keep, like you rightly said. But then again, that's probably where India was, Bharat was, and India should be. That's my personal opinion. I simply thank both my guests for being so kind in order to indulge in some frivolous and some very serious questions, and being able to join us for what has been a very exciting episode, and by far the most candid one that we've had thus far, at what is Rishabh Presents I.I.M.U.N's Classroom to Career series. Thank you, Sai Deepak, and thank you, Soumya, for joining in.